Hello Story Storer listeners. Before we start this interesting story, please subscribe this channel, Story Storer, and hit the bell icon. Thank you. Now here we go. Sat at the polished oak table in the attorney's office, the air heavy with the scent of aged books and polished leather. The room was a fortress of formality, its walls lined with legal certificates and shelves that seemed to sag under the weight of decades-old secrets. Across from me sat my 3 children, Linner, James, and Thomas, their spouses, and my 2 grandchildren, who barely knew the woman I'd become. At 74, I, Margaret Hensley, had seen my share of life's twists, but nothing prepared me for the unraveling about to unfold. Attorney Whitaker, a wiry man with silver hair and a penchant for adjusting his spectacles, cleared his throat as we proceed with the estate planning discussion. Mrs. Hensley has requested to allocate her assets during her lifetime. His voice was steady, but I caught the flicker of curiosity in his eyes as he glanced my way. I sat quietly, hands clasped, my gaze sweeping over my family's faces. For months, I'd rehearsed this moment, knowing it would reveal truths I wasn't sure I was ready to face. Eleanor, my youngest, at 46, shifted in her tailored blazer, her impatience as sharp as the diamond studs in her ears. She'd inherited her father's quick wit, but none of his patience. "Can we just get to the point, Mom? We all have schedules to keep." Her brothers, James and Thomas, murmured in agreement. James glanced at his sleek wristwatch, while Thomas tapped away at his phone, his attention elsewhere. None of them had visited me in nearly a year unless they needed something alone, a favor, a quick stop to ease their guilt. Whitaker continued, undeterred. Mrs. Hensley's primary assets include her home, valued at approximately $400,000, a savings account with $52,000, and her late husband's retirement fund. I watched their reactions closely. Their faces tightened, disappointment flickering like a storm cloud. They'd expected more, a grand fortune, perhaps, fueled by their father's old stories of investments and prosperity. "That's it." Eleanor's voice sliced through the room, sharp and incredulous. "What about the properties Dad always talked about? The rental income he mentioned?" I took a slow breath, the familiar ache in my chest flaring. "Your father liked to dream out loud," I said softly. "This is what remains." The room buzzed with hushed exchanges. James whispered to his wife, shaking his head. Thomas rubbed his temples, as if calculating whether I was worth their time. But it was Eleanor who delivered the blow that cut deepest. She stood, her chair scraping the floor, her face flushed with anger and something uglier, contempt. "Are you kidding me? You're holding on to this measly sum like it's some treasure. What do you even need money for? You're practically at death's door." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, laughter erupted. James first, a low chuckle that grew infectious. Thomas joined in, followed by his wife, and even my teenage granddaughter smirked, shaking her head. The sound pierced me, not with shock, but with a slow, grinding pain, like a blade twisting in an old wound. These were my children, the ones I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for, and they saw me as nothing more than a frail obstacle to their expectations. Whitaker cleared his throat, his discomfort palpable. "Perhaps a brief recess." "No," I said, my voice steady, despite the storm inside me. "Let's finish this." The laughter faded, but their smug smiles lingered. Eleanor sat, looking satisfied, as if she'd put me in my place. I reached into my handbag, my fingers brushing against a sealed envelope. "There are additional documents to review," I said, placing it on the table with a deliberate calm. My lips curved into a faint smile, one that made Whitaker's eyebrows lift. For the first time that day, I felt a spark of something beyond hurt control. "What's that?" James asked, his eyes narrowing at the envelope. "Just a little something I've kept safe," I replied, my voice light but my hand steady. You see, sometimes the people you underestimate most are the ones who hold the real surprises. The room fell silent, the air thick with unease. Their earlier confidence wavered, replaced by confusion. Practically at death's door, I repeated Eleanor's words, letting them hang in the air. What an interesting choice of words. The envelope sat there, unopened, like a storm waiting to break. I leaned back, studying their faces so different now, uncertain, almost vulnerable. Before we open this, let me tell you a story about a young widow, left with 3 children and nothing but debt. Eleanor rolled her eyes. We've heard this one, Mom. The struggling single mother bit. No, I said sharply, my voice cutting through her dismissal. You've heard what I let you hear. The truth is something else entirely, I began, my words gaining strength. When your father died in that factory accident, I was 29, with a mortgage, 3 children under 12, and $184 in the bank. The life insurance barely covered his medical bills. I worked 3 jobs cleaning houses at dawn, waitressing at the diner by day, and sewing alterations late into the night. You remember Mrs. Callahan, the neighbor who watched you after school? I paid her with the money I earned, hemming skirts for the women's club. The room was still, even Whitaker motionless, his pen frozen. My children shifted uncomfortably. They'd never asked about those years, never cared to know how we survived. But I wasn't just surviving, I continued. I was building. Every extra dollar, every tip, every late-night stitch went into a plan to ensure this family would never face poverty again. I touched the envelope, my fingers steady now. In 1982, I bought my first property, a rundown triplex 2 towns over, with money I'd saved for 3 years. I registered it under MH Properties. My initials and your father's. You never wondered why I was gone some weekends, assuming I was at book club or visiting friends. Thomas's face paled. You bought property? With what money? The money I earned while you slept, while you played, while you grew up thinking your mother was just a weary widow scraping by. My voice held no anger, only clarity. By 1988, I owned 4 properties. By 1994, 9 today, I own 18 apartment complexes, 5 retail spaces, 4 office buildings, and a small strip mall. I opened the envelope, spreading deeds, bank statements, and business records across the table. MH Properties generates $48,000 a month in rental income. Eleanor gasped, a sharp, involuntary sound. James picked up a statement, his voice a whisper. This shows $924,000. That's one account, I said. There are 3 others. Thomas grabbed a deed, his hands trembling. This office building, it's in the city's commercial district. This is worth millions. $2.8 million, to be exact, I replied. Appraised last month. Their earlier arrogance was gone, replaced by stunned silence. But why? Eleanor's voice was faint. Why hide this? Why let us think you were nothing? I gathered the documents, my movements deliberate, because I wanted to see who you were. I wanted to know if my children loved me, or just what they thought I could give them. James ran a hand through his hair, his face flushed with shame. Mom, we didn't know. If we'd known, you'd have treated me differently, I finished. But would it have been love, or would it have been greed? I stood, my joints protesting but my resolve unshaken. These documents represent 45 years of sacrifice, strategy, and silent victories. While you assumed I was incapable of more than knitting scarves and hosting holiday dinners. Eleanor reached for a deed, but I placed my hand over it. This meeting is done. Wait, Thomas said, his voice desperate. We need to talk about this. We need to understand what you need to understand, I said, my tone quiet but firm, is that everything just changed. I tucked the envelope into my bag, repeating Eleanor's words one last time. practically at death's door. But this door leads somewhere you never imagined. 3 days passed before they reached out. 3 days of quiet in my modest home, where I tended my roses, read novels I'd shelved for years, and called friends who valued me for more than my bank account. When the doorbell rang on Friday, I wasn't surprised to see them on my porch, their faces stripped of the smugness I'd come to know. "Mom," James began, his voice measured, "we need to talk." I let them in, noting how they scanned my living room with fresh eyes. The faded couch they'd mocked, the family photos they'd ignored suddenly. They saw them differently. "I've made tea," I said, settling into my worn armchair, the one Eleanor had suggested I replace last. Thanksgiving. They sat, united not by love but by panic. Thomas pulled out a folder. "We researched MH Properties, the strip mall on Oak Street. We drove by yesterday. It's massive, Mom. The parking lot was packed. 27 businesses," I corrected. "The anchor tenant, a hardware store, just signed a 12-year lease." James leaned forward. "The income from that alone must be significant." "Your father always said location was key," I replied. "He'd have been proud." Their glances darted between them, calculations flashing in their eyes. "There's something else," I said, setting down my cup. "Something you found, but haven't mentioned." Eleanor's face went ashen. "How did you know?" "Mr. Larson, my property manager, called yesterday," I said. "Professional courtesy. He's handled my insurance for 8 years. He mentioned your visit to his office." The silence was heavy. Finally, James spoke, avoiding my gaze. "We found the report. The one from the private investigator you hired." I nodded. "About the conversations last Easter, when you discussed putting me in a care facility, how it would be better for everyone if I were out of the way." "We didn't mean it like that," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "We thought you were struggling, that you needed help. Help managing my $48,000 a month." I asked, my laugh devoid of humor. "Or help getting me out of your lives." Tears came, raw and unpracticed. "We're sorry, Mom. We didn't know. Didn't know I was capable. Didn't know I'd built an empire. Or didn't know I overheard you planning to discard me like an old rug." I walked to my desk, pulling out a thicker envelope. "There's more you should know. My will, updated last week, includes a no-contest clause. If any of you challenge it, sue, or try to declare me incompetent, you lose everything. And if anyone attempts to force me into a facility, the entire estate goes to a dementia research foundation." "You can't mean that," Eleanor whispered. "I do," I said. "And one more thing." I held up a letter. "This instructs my attorney to investigate my family thoroughly if anything suspicious happens to me, sudden illness, unexplained death, or coercion." The ticking of the mantel clock filled the silence. "Why?" James asked, his voice small. "Why do this to us?" "I'm not doing anything to you," I said softly. "I'm protecting myself from you." I opened the door. "This visit is over." Eleanor paused as she passed, her voice low. "This isn't finished, Mom." "No, dear," I replied, meeting her gaze. "It's just started." I vanished on a Wednesday in April, leaving only a note on my kitchen table. "Gone exploring. Don't search for me, Margaret." My children didn't know I'd been planning this for months, ever since I overheard their Easter plotting. Mr. Larson, the investigator they'd unwittingly tipped off, now worked solely for me. In March, I'd sold for smaller properties, funneling the funds into accounts they'd never find, in banks far from their reach. From my suite in Savannah, I watched their panic unfold through my network of neighbors and friends. Mrs. Delaney, my next-door confidant, called daily. "They're losing it, Margaret," she said on day 4, her voice tinged with glee. "Eleanor's been by 3 times, demanding answers. She wasn't polite. I sipped coffee, gazing at the riverfront. For the first time in years, I woke without their judgment weighing me down. And the boys, I asked. James hired a search firm, Mrs. Delaney reported. Thomas keeps circling your house, like you'll just pop up. The irony was rich. They spent more effort hunting me in a week than visiting me in a decade. By week 2, they discovered the sales. 4 properties, gone, sold to buyers unconnected to MH Properties. Mrs. Delaney laughed. Eleanor was at Larson's office, yelling about fraud. He told her you had every right to sell what's yours. Of course I did. Those properties were mine, built from my sweat, my sleepless nights, my silent triumphs. But my children believed they were entitled to it all, simply for existing. Week 3 brought a shift. Mrs. Delaney's voice trembled one morning. Margaret, they found donation records. Eleanor was sobbing real tears this time. She kept mentioning cancer charities and women's shelters. I closed my eyes. While they'd been scheming to institutionalize me, I'd been giving millions to causes that mattered: hospitals, shelters, scholarships for women like the one I'd been, scraping by but dreaming big. That night, my phone rang. James's number. I answered. Mom, please, he said, his voice raw. We saw the donations. Tell me you didn't give it all away. Not all, I said. But enough. How much is enough? He asked, barely audible. Enough, too. Help those who don't laugh at an old woman's worth. We're sorry, he said, the words spilling out. We were wrong. Come home. Let us fix this. Fix what? I asked. The years you treated me like a burden. The plans to lock me away. We didn't. You did, I interrupted. And if you'd loved me for me, not my money, none of this would have happened. Where are you? He asked, voice cracking. Somewhere people respect me, I said. Somewhere. I'm not just a frail old woman. Are you coming back? I looked at the river, its currents endless and free. I don't know, I said, and meant it. There's one more surprise, I added. Mr. Larson will contact you next week. You'll see what your choices cost. I hung up, stepped onto my balcony, and breathed in the night air. Tomorrow, they'd learn about the biggest sailor retail complex, sold for $5.2 million. They'd feel the weight of what they'd lost. I returned home in June, driving a new SUV I'd bought with cash in Savannah. The hydrangeas in my yard bloomed vibrant purple, a reminder of life's persistence. Mrs. Delaney rushed over as I parked. Margaret, you're back. They're frantic. Eleanor calls daily. I hugged her. They'll know soon enough. Within hours, they were at my door, their faces a mix of relief and dread. Mom, James said, thank God you're safe. Sit, I said, settling into my chair. We have things to discuss. Larson told us about the retail complex, Thomas said. $5.2 million. My most profitable property. I confirmed. The main tenant paid $15,000 a month. Where's the money? Eleanor asked, her voice trembling. I pulled out a folder. $2.5 million went to a pediatric oncology center. $1.5 million to a women's education fund. The rest is in trusts for my grandchildren, accessible at 35, but only if they build a relationship with me based on respect, not greed. And us? James asked, his voice hollow. You get what you valued me at in that meeting, I said. Nothing. The silence was a verdict. But there's more, I continued, picking up an old photo of Uzme and my children, laughing in a park decades ago. For 45 years, I built an empire in secret, not to hide my success, but to test your hearts. I wanted to know if you'd love me as a simple widow, not a wealthy one. Their eyes glistened with regret, but it wasn't enough. We can change, Eleanor pleaded. We see it now. You see my money, I said. Not me. I stood. My age settling into my bones, but my spirit unyielding. I'm not cruel. I'm not punishing you. I'm saving myself. James leaned forward. What do you want from us? I want you to leave, I said. Live your lives. Let me live mine. Maybe one day, if you see me as more than a bank account, we can try again. Not today. You're cutting us off, Thomas asked, stunned double quotes. No, I said. You did that when you laughed and called me worthless. As they left, Eleanor turned back, tears streaming. Do you hate us? No, I said softly. I'm just done begging for love you were never going to give. They left, and I sat in my garden, the sunset painting the sky in hues of amber. 2 years later, I write this from a seaside bungalow in Maine, purchased with my earnings, furnished with my choices, filled with people who cherish my stories, not my wealth. My neighbor, Clara, joins me for tea each morning, discussing literature and the migratory patterns of herons. Money never enters our talks. My book, Silent Empires, A Widow's Journey to Freedom, was published last fall by a niche press. It's a modest success, resonating with women who see their own struggles in mine. I speak at libraries and women's groups, sharing how it's never too late to claim your worth. At 76, I'm recognized for the businesswoman I am, not the mother. My children discarded. My properties are streamlined. 3 key holdings remain, managed by a firm. The rest funded scholarships for single mothers across New England. My grandchildren, now young adults, write letters, curious about the grandmother who vanished. We've met for coffee, tentative steps toward connection. Their trusts wait, secure. For their 35th birthdays, contingent on respect, not entitlement, my children Eleanor. James Thomas Surface, in small-town gossip. James's company faltered, banking on an inheritance that never came. Thomas downsized, leaning on his in-laws. Eleanor works in property management, an irony I can't ignore. Their birthday cards and voicemails pile up, pleading for forgiveness. I read Eleanor's latest letter, full of regret, but it's too late. I choose peace over reconciliation. This morning, as I tend my lavender and watch the tide, I reflect on that meeting. Eleanor's cruel words echoing, practically at death's. Dorsey was right about the end of something not my life, but my role as their scapegoat, their ATM, their burden. These legs, at 76, are stronger than ever, carrying me through gardens, speaking engagements, and a life I built for myself. The phone rings. Clara, eager to share the latest book club pick. I smile, answering, "Good morning, dear." At 76, I've learned the best stories aren't the ones you plan, but the ones you live when you finally set yourself free. I'm curious about you, my listeners. What would you do in my shoes? Have you faced a betrayal that forced you to redefine family? Comment below with your thoughts and the city you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story has traveled. Don't miss 2 other stories on our channel, linked on the final screen. They'll surprise you. Please subscribe to Story Storer, like, and share to support these tales of resilience. Thank you for joining me today.